second speaker for the government side, Mr. Ben Harris-Quinney, to continue the case for government side. Hear, hear.
Thank you very much. I would advise you to take as many photos as possible this evening, because to have both Peter Hitchens on and myself on a table that's called the government side is perhaps the rarest thing there ever was. I'm sure that's been some sort of accident in administration. Look, we've heard a lot about polls and statistics. Well, I run a think tank, and what happens when you call a polling company or a company that is engaged in statistical analysis is basically they say, what results do you want? And then they get the results you want, and you put out your press release saying, 1,000% of people believe this. We've seen the validity of polling recently in the US election, in the Brexit vote, in the myriad of economic analyses which are being shown to be false on a day-to-day basis. So I think there is actually some value in the anecdote, and I'm going to give you a few. I didn't go to grammar school. My parents grew up in the 60s, so I didn't go to public school either. It was all that sort of thing. They believed that I should be educated at a comprehensive school. So I probably shouldn't really be here as chairman of the Bow Group. The Bow Group is 65 years old this year. It's Britain's oldest conservative think tank, and in those 65 years, only 2 of its chairmen were educated at comprehensive school. Now, you may think that's because we're a bunch of public school toffs. You may even ask why anyone would want to be chairman of the Bow Group, and that is a fair point. But it does tend to turn you into a conservative of some prominence. Our senior board of patrons, for example, is made up of Roger Scruton, Norman Tebbit, David Starkey, 3 of the greatest, I would argue, conservative minds in the country, perhaps the world, all have something else in common, which is that they attended grammar schools. So did, as we heard, the Prime Minister. So did the leader of the opposition, though he could have, of course, afforded not to. So did, in my view, our greatest peacetime Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. And one has to wonder, had there not been those grammar schools available to attend, would these people have had any chance of getting to where they are today? And if not, who would be in their place? The anti-grammar school crowd would say, it'll be a kid from a comp. But the sad truth is, if you scan the professional sector, that the most likely outcome would be their place would have been taken by yet another public school boy. I have had the privilege of having quite a good education despite going to a comprehensive school. And I was at university with a lot of people who were publicly educated at public school. And I remember an anecdote from a friend of mine, Pierre, who said, I was called in to my housemaster's office and said, things are looking bad, Pierre. I think you're only going to be able to look to get into a university like Exeter. That's how bad things were. Whereas at my school, I remember the only person that came to talk to us about universities was a chap from the University of Luton. And the University of Luton, I'm sure has its merits. But there is a huge, huge divide in society in Britain today, as it has been really over the last 50 to 100 years, that if you go to public school, your chances of success are far, far higher. And the worst fate that could befall you is going to Exeter University. I've got nothing against people that attended public schools. Good luck to them and their parents. But do we really only want to be governed and ruled by them? Isn't it right that people without money but with ability should get a chance too? And grammar schools over a long shelf life have achieved fantastic results, on average 2 grades higher per pupil for those who attend grammar schools. And the results, you can call them anecdotal, but you can see them in public life. which is dominated, unfortunately, by those who went to grammar schools and those who went to public schools, because they're essentially based upon the seemingly obvious principle that humans are not born with equal ability academically or otherwise. And those with greater ability perform exponentially better under a selective system. The left will say, but we want all schools to be great, just like we want all people to have equal amounts of money and every flower to have an equal amount of petals. They tried, admittedly, to achieve this over the last 50 years and have clearly failed. So what they really mean now is we can't raise the bottom up, so we want to knock the top down. That's why one of the first things they did in government was ban the expansion of grammar schools. And that's why this government has agreed to lift the ban, and the Bow Group has formed the largest coalition of organisations to make sure that they do. The only thing we can be certain about in the future is that there will be more choice, certainly in education. Technology will have a revolutionary effect over education over the next 10 and 20 years. And that will mean that no government can really restrain access to education in Britain. So this idea of government banning schools and types of schools and types of education is going to become fairly ludicrous fairly quickly anyway. We are not arguing for a rigid system of the past, but lifting a ban that would offer a wider range of choices for parents and pupils. Homeschooling, academies, religious schools, public schools, grammar schools, virtual schools. Choice and competition will be the future of education as all else, and that will drive up standards. And in that spirit, I must clarify, I'm arguing for modern grammar schools. That means some changes. There shouldn't be such a hard cliff at 11. There's no reason for that, just like there's no reason for a hard cliff for universities at 18. And we have to change the way this country thinks and works more widely. Grammar schools are not a panacea. I know plumbers who earn 4 or 5 times what I do, and grammar schools and selective academic schools must be combined with academies and apprenticeships that can maximise non-academic excellence, which is just as valuable. So our builders and plumbers can be seen in terms of earning and respect as the rest of the professions, as they are in countries like Germany. You will probably one day have to make the choice, I hope you do, of where to send your children to school. So what we are arguing is let's give ourselves and our children the most choice we can. Thank you.